There's a lot of big debates out there. There's Magic versus Bird, boxes versus briefs, or even the real big one, of course, Coke versus Pepsi, which is better. But if you're a cat, you have 9 lives versus Friskies. Welcome to Section 420, Talkin Yankees. It finally happened. The Yankees beat not only one, but 2 good teams. Taking back-to-back series against both the Houston Astros and the Toronto Blue Jays. We'll kind of look back at some of the series there, because some important points there. And of course, the Houston one, a lot of craziness there. Of course, we have the whole situation with the umpire there, blowing back-to-back calls and back-to-back games there. You got a supposedly maybe a George Brett situation with the bat there. So we'll look at that series there, but most importantly, Yankees winning both series there and moving on, of course, with that in mind with Toronto. A little good news, again, you don't hope for a play to get hurt, but Bo Bichette on the 10-day IL, and obviously you don't have to be a rocket science why that is good news for Yankees, but in case you don't know why it's good news for Yankees, we'll get into that as well. And just give you his numbers there, because he is having a good season, though. So for the Yankees to get the AL East, it's good if he takes a little, a vacation. Maybe if he took the rest of the season off, that'd be good there. And of course, during that Toronto series, your eyes might have been a little buggy. Say, well, what is this? You saw Aaron Judge in right field, so finally back in right field for the Yankees now. We got some, obviously early feedback in terms of his throwing velocity there, so we'll give you some of the numbers there. And obviously, as you expected, the elbow isn't fully 100% there, and we all knew that was the case. And another kind of maybe guy that's been injured a little bit, Paul Goldschmidt, kind of been under the radar a little bit. This was a lot of Yankees hitting hot right now, but banged up a little bit. Kind of give an update on his situation there, mainly dealing with the right knee. And this has been only goes back to last month there. So there's a whole episode for you. So we're going to kind of look back a couple of series there. And of course, as the Yankees still have a little bit left to go in September there, where again, the schedule is going to get much softer after a couple of hard series there, where again, things are at least lining up for the Yankees, at least be able to leapfrog the Toronto Blue Jays, especially with Bo Bichette now being on the IL there. So I feel this is going to be a very positive episode. But before we get started, make sure you subscribe to the audio podcast version of Section 420 Talkin Yankees. So get my takes on things faster. And I think a lot of things are going to be beeping on, because obviously we're not looking at the wild card yet there. If you're the Yankees, still focused on the AL East there. But there's going to be a lot of updates. A lot of teams probably leapfrogging. Maybe some teams kind of completely drop out there. And it kind of maybe almost look at a little bit of other division leaders there and who you might potentially match up there in the postseason there. So we'll look at all that good stuff there. So make sure you're podcast subscribe. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, make sure you subscribe on YouTube. And if you happen to catch it on the boob tube, the TV as they say, make sure you subscribe both on YouTube and get the audio podcast. Got a big September coming up. You want to catch everything. And after what was pretty much almost a miserable summer with the Yankees, at least they got up to September on the right foot there, where the competition was going to get tough for a couple of series now. We know what the mark was against the Yankees before entering a couple of these series there. Was them, they could beat up on the sub-500 teams there, and they could beat up on all the last place teams there. They could bludgeon them with home runs and stuff. But when they come up against a good team that has better fundamentals and all that stuff and better pitching there, the Yankees fall short. And kind of there was a case of that. I remember in the last episode we did look at the numbers there. Wasn't as crazy as you thought it'd be. Again, teams that were 500 better. The Yankees were pretty much about even 500 on the season there, but that's probably the case you say for most teams there. Obviously, you play a team that's equally as good or better than you, then more or less you're going to be 500 there, and then you feast on the lesser teams there. So, yes, that was the case for the Yankees. We looked at the numbers there, but that's probably the case for most teams if you want to analyze that. But of course, the Yankees did have that test there. Again, after having a good run there against teams like the Washington Nationals and the White Sox, are not exactly the best of the best there. That's the way they close out August, and then you were entering the series, a couple of big series against one against the nemesis Houston Astros, and of course, even probably bigger nemesis, at least for this season, the Toronto Blue Jays, who've been slapping the Yankees around all of 2025 there, and the Yankees came out with flying colors on both, and even almost had a situation where they could almost swept the Houston series. Now, over the last couple of years, I don't know what it is, after, even though Houston would say is probably one of the Yankees' main rivals, and the Yankees actually in Houston has been very good there, and they kind of continue that, taking 2 out of 3 games there. The first one really a laugher there, and what you really like to saw, really only the first start, that first game against Houston, and almost the last game Sunday against Toronto there, you had 2 starts from Max Fried, where it looks like he's back into his form there. We're looking at his previous games in the last episode, and it looks like he was inching towards getting back into form a little bit, but so it was like, all right, his last 2 starts are good. What does that really mean? But now you look at almost like 4 good starts in a row, but obviously that first game in Houston there, going 7 innings, and kind of that's the Max Fried we saw back in April and May. They're going 7 innings, not the Max Fried we saw like in June and July where he was huffing and puffing to barely go in 5 innings there. And also as well, the same thing, going 7 innings in the Toronto game to close out and again take the rubber match in that series there. So at least looks like the Yankees got their ace back, and it's kind of the right time there because you have a couple of starts left of the season in September there. Then you get into the postseason there, so you want to get them sort of ramped up again and get them hot again going into the postseason. But as for the Houston series, first game there, overall after there. And then the second game, of course, that's where all the controversy was there. Obviously, it probably goes to the 8th inning, which, and again, I've repeated this a bunch of times, both here on the YouTube channel and if you listen to the audio podcast with Devin Williams, you cannot put this guy in a big spot, to say the high leverage spot after the 6th inning. You want to give him the 6th inning, fine. After that, you cannot do it. Go anywhere else in that bullpen. I don't care. It could be, Mark Leiter Jr. If you want to resurrect, Kyle Farnsworth, you want to put me in there, put Boone in there, anybody but Devin Williams there. And unfortunately, even though he's been showing some positive signs, it's kind of good game, bad game, good game. This was not a good game for him. Now, he was getting squeezed a little bit by Brian Walsh, the home plate umpire for that game there. And obviously, we'll get into the whole situation, him being a Red Sox fan. I don't think that was the case there. Look, we've seen what the problem with Devin Williams has been the entire season, having the struggles there. I mean, he's cost probably anywhere from 8 to 10 games, 8 to 10 losses for the Yankees. And obviously, that was a situation where it was a tied game. Perhaps the Yankees, maybe could almost swept this series, but unfortunately, gives a couple of walks there. And of course, they bring in Doval, who wasn't that much better there. And the Houston ends up blowing that, breaking the game wide open. Then the Yankees would get a big 3-run home run to at least bring it to 8 to 7 there, but of course, fall short and lose that middle game with a lot of controversy. Other than that, you said series was very positive. The Yankees, the third game, of course, get out to a big lead. I know it got a little dicey there in the 9th inning there with Bednar closing the game out. Obviously, had a couple big strikeouts to end the game against Correa and Walker there, but did get out of the big jam there. But you never really felt the Yankees were in danger a little bit just because Bednar, he'll give up a run here and there, but he pretty much hasn't buckled yet overall for the Yankees, except for that first game in Miami. But that was his first game in the Yankees. Give him a break there. But overall, you say the Yankees were probably the more dominant team, clearly, in those 3 games, even though, again, the second game had a little bit of controversy. The Yankees had a situation where they could have possibly swept the series there. So you like the stuff there. And again, you just like the fact that, even though Houston have started to come back a little bit in their ballpark there in the 9th inning there, Bednar, you now have the confidence in him. I mean, that was definitely like a postseason game. I mean, the intensity was high there. The fans were going crazy. Everybody was on their feet there. And for him to get 2 big strikeouts, especially one against Correa, where he fell behind in the count and had 2 fastballs to put him away. Again, Correa kind of starting to heat up as well there. So get a big out in a big spot like that. So it made you really feel good about Bednar. And I kind of improved it a little bit, even going into that series. I noticed a lot of the Yankee bats were getting hot, and some of those bats did tee off in that Houston series, mainly Austin Wells. Couple of home runs, especially one to an opposite field there. Trent Grisham has been red hot, hitting his 30th home run of the season there. So overall, the Yankee offense, even Giancarlo Stanton hit like the biggest home run possible of the season there. Almost hit like the roof there in Houston. So those guys really teed off in the Houston series. Now, the offensive-wise, they didn't really carry that into the Toronto series, but good enough there to take at least 2 out of 3 games there. And Cam Schlitter, we featured him last episode. Okay, look, he had 9 starts. He was really good for the Yankees. He was going to have a clunker at some point. Okay, he has a clunker in that first Toronto game. He gives like 3 runs in the first inning, and the game just gets away from the Yankees early there. Fine, give away that game. But again, the Yankees take the second and third games back with strong pitching, not just relying on home runs and stuff like that. It was the arms there that really carried the Yankees in those final 2 games. One good start by Luis Gil there, going 6 innings. Now, the little problem with him before there that he was only able to go 5 innings. Now you get a 6-inning game out of him where they pitches really well there, and you get just enough offense out of the Yankees in the second game there to at least tie the series 1-1. And then, of course, what you would want at the point, your ace, Max Fried, on the mound for that third game there, and the Yankees take that 1-3 by score 3-4. Again, Bednar getting the save. Again, we feel confident in him getting the save both in the Saturday and the Sunday game again. So he's definitely taking that closer role without a doubt. I mean, we kind of knew that almost like a week or 2 ago, but if there's any doubt, Bednar is the 9th inning guy for the Yankees there. And it's just a very satisfying series because Houston's always, obviously been a thorn in the Yankees side more in the postseason, because Toronto this season, though, been slapping the Yankees around all 2025. And see them almost getting the Yankees when they're kind of at their low points of the season, just the way the schedule's shaked out there. But now you got a point where the Yankees are kind of riding high a little bit. So the Yankees almost on even playing field Toronto, and it take 2 or 3 games at home there. Get an early lead there. Maybe you'd like to see them extend that lead more because you get 3 runs in the first inning and you only scored 4 runs for the game, and that kind of bothers you a little bit. But overall, you'll take the win. You'll take 2 tight wins in a row against a team that you're chasing there. And since they were able to take 2 out of 3 in that series, at least pull themselves with only 2 games back in the AL East, which plenty of baseball left in them for to overcome and take the AL East top spot there, which is again still in play with them, especially now with Bo Bichette for Toronto, one of their best hitters now going to be on the IL, which we'll get into next there. And of course, want to get into those FanDuel and sports betting stuff. I'm not big into it, but pretty much if you look overall, the Yankees have a 98% chance of getting into the postseason. So whether it's through the AL East or one of the 3 wild card spots, right now the Yankees own the top one there. I mean, obviously, you're still not really looking at that. You want to focus on AL East, but at least it's safe to say the Yankees are going to make the postseason in some fashion, unless you have a nuclear meltdown, which you just don't see happening there. So if you want to feel good about yourself, yeah, but again, you still want to fight for that AL East spot there. You want to, and perhaps, maybe improve your record there so you're one of the top 2 seeded teams in the American League there. And so you have the home field advantage, all that stuff. You want that last at bat there. You don't want to be the team on the road, even though the Yankees, last season against Kansas City and Cleveland played all right on the road there. I don't think they can't win on the road there. But of course, you want in your own ballpark there, you want that last bat, whether it's the bottom of the 9th, bottom of the 10th there, so you could walk off. And as I mentioned at the top, a bad break for Toronto, but again, a little good luck for the Yankees. Not that you root for anybody to get hurt and wanting anybody to get hurt, but because, hey, it happens, it happens. And of course, Toronto with a kind of a big blow there. So shortstop Bo Bichette will be placed on the 10-day IL. Now they're saying it's like an elbow, they say inflammation, they say elbow sprain. Of course, that was probably with the collision with Wells during the Yankee series there, and I guess maybe a game or 2 afterwards, maybe it was balking on him, so they figured to put him on the 10-day IL, let him get healed up as soon as possible, at least at that point, so he can at least maybe salvage the rest of September and then have him moving forward into playoffs there. But of course, as both teams are, obviously as Toronto's trying to push the Yankees down further in the AL East standing, the Yankees trying to climb up there. Obviously, them not having Bo Bichette obviously advantage Yankees there and there. Again, I'm not saying Toronto's going to completely collapse there, but he's definitely a big cog in their offense. And again, if you haven't been paying too attention to his numbers there, hitting 311. Again, how many players hit over 300 these days? Not that many there. So hitting 311 with 18 home runs, 94 RBIs, and an OPS of .840. So not exactly judgy numbers, but very good numbers there. So if this guy is going to be out for the next 10 days for Toronto, definitely advantage for the Yankees there. Again, the Yankees schedule can have a couple more tough series left, but after that, then things will get much easier for the Yankees there. So I'm sure Toronto's probably want to make sure they get Bichette back as soon as possible. And speaking of creaky elbows, Aaron Judge returned to right field after supposed to be back quite a while ago. In fact, remember, during the interleague against St. Louis, they were talking about maybe him working out and making an appearance there. That never happened. We were waiting. Even got to the point where they had to put Giancarlo Stanton out there, which I thought was a bad idea. Okay, hasn't been bad for the Yankees so far, knock on wood. Still think it's not the greatest idea, but eventually we did finally get Aaron Judge back in right field during that Toronto series. Now, look, we all know the situation. He's coming back from an injured right elbow. He was not going to be 100%. We all knew he was not going to be 100% there. So, and of course, you kind of saw some of the elements of that. Of course, they were looking at his miles per hour on the throws there. Now, his career average is 90. One of the throws he made during the Toronto series that was clocked at 70 miles per hour. Then there was another one that was clocked a little bit less at 62 miles per hour. So people were worried about, is he at full strength? No, of course he's not. We all knew the case. But the Yankees look like they're going to work around it in a couple of ways. Boone mentioned that probably him and Stan are probably going to flip-flop a lot, probably the rest of the way there. So, give Judge a game in right field. Then the next game, Stan's in right field and Judge is the DH, and just, let him rest that, elbow on a game-to-game basis, which kind of makes sense. And again, so far, Stanton has been throwing up on himself in the outfield there, been durable. Again, I don't love the idea, but again, if it's to solve some problems, this is for a few weeks, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. Again, Stanton's been hitting hot there, so you really can't argue with the results. Again, we haven't seen Stanton really in terms of the batting average this good as a Yankee pretty much since he's been here there. So if the right field's working for him, he's carrying that to the plate, all the more better. And as for Aaron Judge, they looks like they can do some design things. As you saw the situation with Jazz, they want to move him in closer from the infield there, so maybe cut off the throws a little early there so he doesn't have full strength, as Judge wouldn't have. Now, fans were kind of getting buggy of Boone a little bit. Not saying Boone handles everything okay. First they asked Boone about, is Judge looks like the throws aren't coming as hard, and why are they working on some new techniques like throwing into the infield, the cutoff man a little sooner there on the outfield grass? And Boone said, well, we're working through some some things. But what do you expect Boone to say? Look, Judge is hurt. We all know he's hurt there. So yeah, they're gonna have to design some mechanisms there. So he's not gonna be able to fully air it out. You know the case. And in the Toronto series, they did test Judge's arm out, and the rest of the way, that's what you're gonna see. I mean, a lot of teams are gonna run on Judge. You're gonna test that arm to see the way it is, and he's not gonna be 100% there. But that's just the way of baseball. But what else do you expect Boone to say in that situation there? So they'll say, oh, Boone's lying about Judge's not being fully healthy. So yeah, we know he's not fully healthy there. Now again, has he been the same Aaron Judge as last year or the year before, 2022? No, obviously the power's down a little bit. Obviously he lost some time with the oblique injury as well, and of course, I'm sorry, not the oblique, the elbow injury there. So even though he's back and he's durable, and obviously you'd rather have Judge and not having Judge, and even 85% of Judge is probably best, probably best of most major league players out there. But he's not fully 100% though, so the Yankees are going to find their way the rest of the way, throughout the rest of September and October with kind of a lesser Judge. But at least good to see him back in right field there. Obviously, I think over time he will get a little bit better. Obviously, and I like that the Yankees are getting pretty much a break between games there to rest up a little bit. And at some point, is the elbow ever going to be fully 100% again? Probably not till almost spring training next year there. So it's just going to have to deal with it. But obviously, you want to keep both him and most importantly Stanton's bats, both those bats there in the lineup. And another Yankees has been dealing with some injuries, mainly on the radar, hasn't been talking about it, has been Paul Goldschmidt. Obviously, he got up to a really good start there, and of course, he was going to hit 380 the whole season. We all knew that. But as the season went on, there had some issues there, and one of them was, of course, the knee sprain. That was during the St. Louis series where he came back to a place he played for a while. He got a good standing ovation, actually played in the game. And to his credit, that he never went on the IL. Even if you go back in spring training, there he was dealing almost a bad back a little bit there. But again, never to the point where the Yankees had to shut him down there. Well, it looks like he has some new nagging injuries, and it's still in the right knee, but instead of a sprain now it's a deep bone bruise, and it's something he's been playing through day to day there. Hasn't been a case where the Yankees have to put him on the IL. But it's a situation where the Yankees aren't really forced to have to play him because Ben Rice overall doing well for the Yankees. Now Ben Rice can play first base, he can catch. We all know the deal with that there. So even if you got to sit Paul Goldschmidt down a little bit there, just give him a couple of days off a little bit, not the biggest deal in the world. And if you want to look at his numbers there, again, he's come back to earth the way, from what we saw back in April, May. Good. We all knew he was going to hit 380 the whole season, or even 360, or even 320 the whole season there. So right now, standing at 277 with 10 home runs, 43 RBIs in total, has 123 hits. And overall, I wanted to just do a little retrospect on Paul Goldschmidt. I think he's pretty much been just about what you expected. Obviously, last season hit 242. That's after getting off to a horrendous start and having a good second half and seemingly found something, which he seemed to carry over into Yankee spring training and at least the start of the season there. But again, I think maybe with some of the playing time, a little bit inconsistent there just because of the emergence of Ben Rice, who really has come on this season. I'm sure that's eaten to some of Paul Schmidt's play time, but also the fact that, look, he's an older guy, 36, 38 years old there. Obviously, you're going to slow down a little bit there. But if you want to say, when they signed that deal with him, 1 year, $12 million, you pretty much would have taken this. Again, you would have taken someone hitting 277, maybe a little bit more with the home run ball there, but even 10 home runs isn't terrible there, and 43 RBIs. Again, he's not going to. The days of him hitting 100 RBIs are long gone there. So overall, I think he's been decent for the Yankees there. But clearly, you could see in the second half there, this fact of being, he's in his high 30s and seemingly dealing with this little bad knee for different issue there has slowed him down a little bit there. But I think once we get into the playoffs, there, obviously it depends if the Yankees are facing a lefty and righty there. I think obviously Boone has no problem going him to first base, and the whole issue is going to be with the defense. Obviously, Paul Schmidt has a little better defense than Ben Rice there, but of course right now Ben Rice, the young guy, the hotter hitter, he has the exit velo and the home run ball and stuff like that. So what do you do in a postseason game? Do you go with the better defense of Paul Goldschmidt, who's probably not going to hit as good, or do you go with perhaps someone who has a better bat than Ben Rice, but maybe has lesser defense there? So we'll see how those decisions get made by Boone. Again, Ben Rice also has the ability to be a catcher there, but of course, then Austin Wells, who's bat really turned on during the Houston series, obviously he has to show you a little bit more there, but obviously you probably would maybe want to favor Austin Wells. You might feel he's just a little bit better defensively than Ben Rice has catcher there, and catching a very important position, so dealing with a lot of balls and dirt and stuff like that there. So it's going to be a tough decision what you do with Ben Rice. Overall, if I had to take, if I had to read the tea leaves a little bit, I think if Paul Goldschmidt is beat up like this a little bit, that probably favors Ben Rice getting a lot more playing time once we get into the postseason. And if you look at the Yankees starting rotation, of course, the emergence of Cam Schlittler, who again had a bad start against Toronto there, but overall been getting a lot of attention as perhaps the Yankees' new young gun of the future there. And of course, I'm sure all the memes and comparisons to Garrett Cole. And of course, they have the return of Luis Heel, the American League Rookie of the Year last season there. Again, having a pretty good return so far. Again, getting a big win there in the rubber match against Toronto there. And someone who's kind of been forgotten about the whole way has been Will Warren. He's someone who had to compete for a spot in the rotation there. He had a couple of different arms, around there. Of course, with Clark Schmidt before he would go down with Tommy John surgery. He had the whole situation with Stroman. Not sure what the situation is going to be with him. Unfortunately, with Stroman, had the bad knee and he came back. Was this kind of almost really was no place for him. So the Yankees decided to cut bait with him, which was the right move. Then you had Yarbrough in there for a while, who was doing decently. Obviously, he got hurt, needed to be sent down a little bit. But pretty much the whole way, Will Warren has been a steady Eddie really since the start of the season. And again, as crazy it may sound, he'll be actually the first player to make his 30th start of the season there. So, he's been made 30 starts there, and that no other major leaguer pitcher has done that so far this season. So, that might be some jeopardy question there, there in the future there. So, for Will Warren, and again, overall, say he's been okay. I mean, at some points he's been a little disappointed. We saw a lot of games where he's got blasted early there. He's got the stuff, and you always feel, maybe it just translates like that, but he does have those situations where maybe he's too amped up, he's a little wild in the zone there. But overall, I'd say he's been okay. It was the right move to give him a spot in the rotation there. And again, I think he's pretty much done enough to at least hold on to it. I would say he's been tremendous there, but just decent enough. Now, if you want to just check him with a moment, just look at his numbers right now. 8-6. Now the ERA is kind of on the high side, 4.28. You don't like that. Again, still very young, 26 years old, so I think he still has time to grow there. Again, he's going to probably have the velocity for quite a while there. This is in terms of honing it in a little bit better, getting a little better in strikes, so throwing some better quality pitches. But he probably had his worst moment of the season was a little early on in the middle part of the season. That was the July 2nd game where he actually got blasted there. Now, at that particular game, his ERA ballooned to 5.02. Since the 11 starts after that, he's able to knock down his ERA, at least pitching to an ERA of 3.18 in his 11 starts after that. So it seemed like that was probably the low point of the season for him, and has recouped a little bit there. Now, when it comes into him moving forward, is that someone you would trust with a playoff start? No way. And only way you would see Will Warren in a postseason game if it's if another starter got hurt or the other starter ended up giving like 6 runs in the first inning there. So if you see Will Warren in a playoff game there, probably bad news. But overall for this kind of first full regular season of being in the starting rotation, pretty much good there. Again, they still have a couple more starts to go in September there, so I don't know if I want to give him a grade yet there. But I say overall he's been pretty decent there. I think he's earned a spot there. Again, I think that, a lot look forward to him in the future. And it doesn't really affect the Yankees, but it's worth mentioning because this guy's the Yankees. Some of the Yankees had a couple of seasons ago in the rotation, and he always had some injury problem, never worked out. Then he went to the Mets. Well, looks like your favorite pitcher, Frankie Montas, will be shut down with Tommy John surgery. I mean, this guy is like the modern day Carl Pavano. And if you remember, if you remember a little history going back to 2022, Brian Cashman, who at the time we thought had a really good trade deadline, brings in Andrew Benintendi. Of course, then he has the wrist injury and you lose him for the season. Then they bring in Frankie Montas around the same time. But at the time was, again, you were looking at him and Luis Castillo. Who can you get there? Looks like maybe Cashman didn't want to fully give in to the Reds to get him there. So the Yankees end up with Montas go to the lesser there. And Montas was an absolute disaster for the Yankees. Maybe he's had a couple of starts there. Had to a point where they had to shut him down for the rest of the regular season there. Has one appearance in the postseason, but that's just about it. Then you go through the entire offseason where no one notices anything. He shows up spring training, and it looks like his elbow is balking a little bit. And he has to have bone spurs taken out of it, which pretty much removes him for almost the entire 2023 season. Actually comes at the very end there to make like one relief appearance, and then he's done in pinstripes there. So in terms of probably one of the worst Yankee acquisitions ever. And then after that, bounced around a little bit. Had a really good start of the season with the Cincinnati Reds, which then ended up causing him to get traded to the Milwaukee Brewers. Now in 2024, Montas went a total of 7-11 with an ERA of 4.84. Not really great there, but again, at the time, he was pitching really well for the Cincinnati Reds. And even the game against the Yankees, they actually shut the Yankees down, ironically. And then more recently, this past offseason, the Mets signing Frankie Montas, which is a bit of a chin scratcher there. And for the Mets there, only posting a 3-2 record before he ended up getting hurt, and now after being evaluated by the doctors, he'll be shut down with Tommy John surgery, and he won't be able to come back in baseball until 2027 there. So for both the Yankees and the Mets, Frankie Montas has burnt both teams. And And we know the years past, the Yankees, accusing other teams of cheating. Some infamous was because, all the situation with the Red Sox and using the smartwatches. And then, of course, there's always the conspiracy theory, mostly about the old Rogers Center, which is, I guess the previous name of the place there. Where, this accused of Toronto maybe having like a video camera up at one of the hotels there, and they were stealing signs. And, of course, we know the whole pull-out stuff dealing with the Houston Astros, banging on the garbage can, the Altuve buzzer, using video camera stuff too, and having a live feed there into the dugout as well. All sorts of stuff. Well, looks like the Yankees were doing a little sign stealing of themselves there. Now, the Yankee situation is a little different because, stealing signs, again, if it's done organically with no use of technology, is exactly, cheating, and it's something that's been done in baseball, but pretty much got outed about it. But not only out about it, pretty much blatant about it, during that Toronto series, and mainly, of course, we saw this whole situation. We lose that third game, the bottom of the first inning there, 2 runners on for Ben Rice there, and we clearly see Judge putting his arms out there, quoting seeing some sign. Must have been a fastball because Rice smoked the fastball, so maybe when the Judge was putting the arms out, knowing that Rice was getting a fastball right down the pike there, Rice did, and it deposited gave the Yankees an early 3-0 lead there. And of course, we see other players such as Bellinger as well. So it seems like the Yankees now got this sort of reputation of doing that. Now, you might say, is that cheating? No, it is not. Again, you can look at signs there. You can, again, as long as you're not using any sort of technology or any cheating like that or stuff like that. I mean, it's something going on baseball, for many, many decades, even to the start of the game there. So it's really on the other team to hide their signs better, whatever, whether they're touching the belt buckle or touching the head there, using the fingers or whatever repetition you got to do there. It's really on the team there to disguise that better. And if the other team could point it out, it's seen as, maybe a little, not saying dirty there, but it's not exactly cheating, and it's something that's been going on forever. Now, maybe back in the old days when, the game was a little different, if you did do that, let's say when Judge would be at bat next time, he'd probably get a fastball between his eyeballs there. But again, that was a different game, many decades ago. But again, it's something you can do, so it's not exactly cheating. And again, the Yankees pretty much have been blatant about it. And even Bellinger there, it's like, yeah, we do that. I mean, he pretty much admitted to there, so he didn't even try to hide for it. So it seems like the Yankees kind of have the reputation to do that. They seem to have a reputation to be very good at doing that. But again, as long as it's on the field and not using any sort of technology, it's not considered cheating. It's just called a little gamesmanship. Again, it's really on the other team there to hide their signs better. And we've seen some Yankee pitchers get rocked like that. If you want to go back to the 2001 World Series there, I guess the Game 6 there, Andy Pettitte on the mound there, they found out that he was probably tipping his pitches, or maybe Arizona was able to be able to steal signs from Posada there, and he got rocked in the game there. So it does happen, and it kind of has happened to Yankee players in the pitches mainly in the past as well. It all is part of the game there. But speaking of, in terms of a little dishonesty there with Houston there, of course, which they're most known for, of course, another interesting little situation, a little storyline out of the Houston series there was that third game with Taylor Trammell hitting a double in the 9th inning. Again, that's when the Houston probably tried to put a little rally against Bednar there. And again, right away, the umpires looked at the bat a little bit. Now, we didn't know what happened. Austin Wells was asked after the game. He was the catcher right there. He said he had no idea about it, but apparently Boone called something from the dugout to one of the umpires that checked the bat there. And now you say, what was the situation? Now, they looked at the bat for a while, and then the umpires literally took the bat away. Now, they let Taylor Trammell stay in the game there, so there was nothing about the bat they felt that was legal. They want to call him out. And, of course, the whole situation, George Brett back in, I guess that was back in 81 there, or sorry, 83, hits the 3-run home run against Goose Gossage. They look at the bat. The pine tail was a little higher than it should be there. They call him out there. And then, of course, George Brett goes ballistic. So this was almost a similar situation, except that they didn't call Trammell out there. So they felt that the bat wasn't legal, but there was something wrong with it that they wanted to take it out of the game and inspect it there. So now you figure what happened there, what was the whole story about? Because, we didn't really get anything from the booth if you listen to the game on the radio or on the TV there. And really got no explanation really almost till maybe a couple of days after. So apparently what happened with Boone there, he saw that the bat that Trammell was using, and he kind of said he noticed some other Houston players were doing the same thing. He saw a discoloration with the bat. So what does that mean there? So obviously you have all types of bats. You have a bat will just have one color, so it could be like all tan, or it could be all black, or whatever like that. Or you could have a double color bat where like half the bat's beige and the other half is black there. Whatever the case might be, if you have a dual colored bat there, at the 18-inch mark of the bat, so I guess from the bottom of the bat up, that 18-inch, that's where you have to have a clear cut between both colors there. So since this bat looked a little bit blurred there, they thought maybe possibly Trammell was sanding down the bat a little bit there to get some sort of advantage. Now, it wasn't bad enough. They said they didn't see like the bat was sanded where it was illegal there, so that's why they didn't call him out. But they said because there was some discolorization, maybe some substance got on it there, the umpires felt the bat was out of service, so they took it away to take the bat out of service. But again, with always Houston, you always got to watch because they've been known for a lot of cheating.